This is the Thoughts from a Page podcast, which is now a member of the Evergreen Podcasts Network. My name is Cindy Burnett, and each episode I interview authors about their latest works, or others in the book world about their roles, what those roles entail, and the books they love. For more book recommendations, check out my earlier episodes and my website, thoughtsfromapage.com, and follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Thoughts From a Page. Thanks to Maggie Garza of HTX Real Estate Group for sponsoring my podcast. Today, I am chatting with Eden Appiah-Kubi about the Bennet Women. Eden fell in love with classic novels in fourth grade when her mom read her Jane Eyre, chapter by chapter, as a bedtime story. She's an alumna of a small New England university with a weird mascot and a former Peace Corps volunteer. Today, she works as a librarian and lives in the DC suburbs with her husband and hilarious daughter. I hope you enjoy our conversation. And now for a quick break. For the last year, I have been focusing more on my health and eating habits. In connection with that, I have started drinking AG1 in the morning. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my health and energy levels. That is because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. I recommend AG1 to all of my family and friends because the company has a team of doctors and scientists. It is tested for 950 contaminants and is NSF certified for sport. It is formulated based on the latest science, and it maintains high quality standards. Thanks AG1 for sponsoring my show. AG1 is a supplement I trust to provide the support my body needs daily. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/thoughtsfromapage. That's drinkag1.com/thoughtsfromapage. Check it out. And now back to my show. Welcome, Eden. How are you today?
I'm very well. Greetings from sunny Maryland in the DC suburbs.
That's one of the things I have really enjoyed so much about this podcast is talking to people all across the country and then sometimes not even in the country, but elsewhere.
That'd be a lot of fun.
So why don't we start out with you talking a little bit about the Bennet Women? Just give us a quick summary for those that won't have read it yet.
Well, the Bennet Women is a retelling of Pride and Prejudice set on a contemporary college campus. And the heroine is EJ, Elizabeth Jacqueline Lucas, who is an engineering student, a senior at Longbourn University, and an RA. She and her best friend Jamie, who is a recently out trans woman, both live in the titular Bennet house. And it's more than just a woman's dorm. It's sort of an identity based on its sort of location being far away from the campus and the fact that in the Massachusetts winters, they formed a sisterhood in the little house up the hill. And so we're following EJ and Jamie through senior year. And in the fall, at the fall formal particularly, Jamie meets Lee, a handsome young man who's got a sort of junior year glow up. He's suddenly become handsome and as well as cool and popular in a very nice guy way, if you will. His best friend, who's making a sudden appearance on campus, Will. It's later learned that Will is Will Pack, C-list star fleeing Hollywood for mysterious reasons. But he's been in the tabloids in not a good way. So we're wondering why he's there and why, if he's fleeing, why is he being such a jerk to everyone, particularly EJ.
Well, I absolutely love Pride and Prejudice. Jane Austen is one of my favorite authors, and Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion are my two favorites of her stories.
Mine too. Those are the two.
Oh, really? I just think they are just wonderful. And some of the only books that I ever reread, because I'm just not normally a rereader, but I just love both those stories so much that I do actually pick them up and reread them periodically. But so I'm always a sucker for any retelling of Pride and Prejudice. And I just had so much fun reading your book. Such a modern updating of it. I loved all the references. I actually had to look up some of the references. I'm probably too old, but I just thought it was so much fun to read. So how did you decide to do a modern spin on Pride and Prejudice?
Well, it came through a writing group. This has been a long time coming. So the whole book started as a scene for my writing book back in 2007. I actually dug it up the other day thanks to Google Docs. In my 20s, I was in the Jumbo Slice writing group, which we sort of formed on Craigslist. Everything I'm say is going to sound so Bush era. We were formed on Craigslist and I got invited. And Jumbo Slice, for DC area folks will know, is sort of an after pub crawl food. It's a very 2 a.m. kind of meal. So this is a very 20s kind of group. And so part of what we do is that we had different exercises before we critiqued other people's works to just get everyone writing. And one exercise I participated in was rewrite a famous scene from literature. We get like half an hour or less than that actually, and just go. And I immediately thought of proposal scene, and I wasn't that far out of college, so I immediately thought of. I went to a small elite New England college as well, and the village nature of that kind of experience struck me immediately. It's just sort of like everyone knows everyone. There are interesting traditions and lots of weird hierarchies, and so I immediately had wrote a scene, and in that version, Will was just the lead singer of the school's very popular a cappella group, just also very rich and very annoying. And EJ was a hardworking RA. That scene took place in her dorm room, and there are many adjustments to the content of the conversation, but the scene is not that different than it was, all that time ago. So that's where it started. I'm the kind of person who, once characters get in my head, they won't leave me alone. So I tried to write other things, and he's just like, I still have things to say. And so she got her own book.
Well, it was just so fun, as I said, and I loved all your references and how, I don't know, joyful the book was. I thought it was so much fun from beginning to end, and I'm so glad you decided to write it. So it sounds like your publishing journey took a while.
Yeah, so I am as surprised by my publishing journey as anyone. I started taking up writing as a hobby again after college. I left college thinking I was going to go into journalism, and then realizing quickly that the field had changed. Again, early Bush era, so big time for changes in print media and digital media, and realizing that I wanted a different career, but I didn't want to leave writing behind. So that's sort of why I started a writing group, and that was just to see what I could do. And this is a very long story short, but I went to Peace Corps and kept writing while I was in Peace Corps. It's one of my main activities, and then came back, and I had done some work on a novel when I come back. And when you leave a place, you sort of have to sort of get plugged in socially again. And one of my friends who was still in DC was in a writing group, and she invited me. I was like, okay, I'll do that. And it was mainly for a social interaction, and also just because I still liked writing. And through the writing group, I wrote my entire novel. Mostly to see if I could finish it. I had never written anything that big before. I was a bit more of a short story sort of parody writer before, and I finished my novel when I was also about to go on maternity leave. I think after 4 years, and so while I was on maternity leave, I edited it, and not knowing what to do next, I was like, I guess I try and pitch this, and started querying. And then with my new baby, we started taking a new train to work. And one of my train buddies is also a romance writer. Her name Adele Buck, who is actually has her own series. She told me about the World of Twitter contest and things. And so I pitched DV Pit, and that's where I got my amazing agent Michelle in 2016. And basically, we've been on submission since 2017, and there have been many alterations. I changed the voice entirely. It's more of a third-person omniscient, which is, I was reading Game of Thrones at the time, so it seemed like a natural fit. Well, I was third-person omniscient, and then so I changed it to third-person with multiple voices in the style of Game of Thrones. And it was the very last person Michelle pitched was the person who said yes. So that's my story for dreamers everywhere. It can be the very last person who asks. As long as you get a yes, it's a yes.
Exactly. It doesn't really matter who says yes as long as you get a yes, right?
Exactly.
Well, I had a question about the multiple points of view. I really liked that you included Will's point of view and added that in.
Will's point of view was or Will's story was in there, but when I first wrote the novel, I wrote it third-person omniscient. So sort of looking at everyone from above, I knew the reader needed to see all sides for the love to be believable and for the changes in personality to be acceptable. And, I think that's where it's fun to sort of debate, like, did Lizzie really change her mind here? Or did she really change her mind there? And, in that kind of storytelling, it's up to the reader to decide. But I wanted to give more heart than head, if you will. When I was hearing the feedback that people were just struggling with third-person omniscient, and, no one really wanted to read a Victorian novel that's when I was like, okay, I still need everyone's voice in there, and especially Will's, because I feel like if you don't see his side, it'll be very hard to accept, like, what you know about EJ, that she just decided that this was okay. And so that's when I said, like, okay, we gotta have everyone in there. We have to have everyone. I want it to be almost like the love mystery. How did these two people come together? And seeing all the pieces set out, and then seeing them come together romantically, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I guess I just think about when I read Pride and Prejudice, you don't really see as much of Darcy's point of view. I mean, obviously, it's not told from anyone's point of view that way. I mean, you understand how she comes to like him, but you don't see as much of his story, I don't feel like. I mean, I guess you do somewhat, but not as much as you do Will's story in your book.
I will be perfectly honest. I read Pride and Prejudice for the first time in high school, and I remember not buying it. I remember being like, okay, lady, you fell in love with him after you saw his property. Sure. And so I was just like, I can see it now. I can see how they, like, it's more gradual, it's more subtle. But I think it's nice if it's on the page. And, like, that would have been too much for Jane to do. One thing you learn when you're trying to do a retelling is how much of an amazing plotter, how many strings were in the air that you didn't even realize that Jane Austen was, strings in the air, balls were in the air, that you didn't realize that Jane Austen was juggling with, while giving you the emotion and the thought and the commentary on her time. And so I was like, I think for the modern reader, if I'm going to switch to third person omniscient, I need to change more visibly on the page. And not that I don't trust the reader, but I think that I think that's sort of, since I have that ability with that perspective that I chose, I feel like I owe that to the reader, so we can see a bit more of Will's heart.
That makes sense. And I mean, there is so much going on in Pride and Prejudice, so many different storylines that are interwoven. And as you said, commentary on the time. There are many things. And so I think Lizzie does learn about Darcy through other things, and that kind of helps her understand him better. But yes, I think it was really nice to have Will's perspective. Well, what about your job as a librarian? So you're a librarian, correct?
Yes.
So how did that impact your writing and what you felt needed to be in your book, and then kind of the whole process of getting a book out into the world?
So what's interesting is I'm not the kind of librarian you probably think of. I don't work at a public library. I work at a museum. And so I work with a sort of a specialized researchers. And the thing that I got most from my job is, like, one, just like the appreciation of just being around books and how the right book can just sort of brighten someone's day. And it sort of gave me reassurance that, like, my book was going to be that there's someone out there who could use my book, even though my researchers are not getting fiction from me. There are so many specialized books on specialized topics that were coming across my desk that I was like, this book, when I was writing it, I was like, I don't know if people are going to be into it. I was like, no, there's a book for someone. Like, there's a book out there for every person. And there's someone out there who needs my book who hasn't read a book like mine yet. And so the thing I most got out was encouragement to keep going. And that, like, when this book comes out there, it may not be for everyone, but it's going to be for someone who's going to love it.
Oh, I like that. And so, yes, I thought you were a librarian at a public library, so you would be encountering a lot of fiction and things like that. But it sounds like from your job that you aren't, and so you would gain different insight than as a public librarian.
Right.
What do you hope readers take away from your book?
Gosh, well, a couple of things. I really wanted to first have a dark-skinned woman fall in love and be happy in a novel, just because you don't see it enough. I think you're seeing it more than you used to. God bless disarray, but you still aren't seeing it enough. And there are a lot of people who just don't see themselves in love stories. I have to admit, I'm a fan of Love Island, both the UK and the American one, and those shows like that, like, the big kissing shows can be a hard thing to watch if you don't fit the TV world's idea of who's beautiful and who's worthy of love. I want my EJ, who is she's a hard worker and she's very smart and talented, but is just an ordinary Black woman who's not a singer, not a model, but walking this life and worthy of love. I think that that's necessary. And I also wanted to present a story that I don't think I heard yet of what it's like to be Black and predominantly white institution, and that is not about race. Like, race is always going to be a factor if you're in the minority, but like, you don't live your life waking up thinking, okay, how hard is it going to be Black today? You live your life, and sometimes racist things happen, or sexist things happen, or fatphobic things happen, and then you deal with them. And just, I wanted to present a whole Black female character with both love ambitions and career ambitions and good friendships and interesting taste, just to show that there's so many different kinds of Black women out there, and that I wanted to challenge myself as a writer not to write and not imagine that I had to represent all kinds of Black women, but I could write one story for one Black woman and hope that the world be interested enough to read her story, and then read other stories about other different kinds of Black women. And there are kinds of Black people, like non-binary people, Black men. There are lots of different kinds of, there still aren't enough representations of. And gosh, they're interesting. And please go read all of them.
Well, I agree with you completely. And that's something I have commented on in several of my interviews with people, is that it doesn't seem like there are enough stories about just normal, regular old Black people living their lives versus it having to be some major drama or major issue, but just like a regular person living their life. And I think maybe that is what resonated so much about your story with me, was because she was wonderful. And she just was, going about her business just like a regular person. And I think there needs to be a lot more of that.
Because that's true.
But I mean, I just don't think there is as much as there should be, though, as you said, the tide is turning. But I don't even know what Love Island is.
Oh, I'm not sure if I should. I don't know if as a value, as a person, I would be a good thing in informing you. But just for context, Love Island is a dating show where they put sexy singles, I'm using my air quotes, on islands and at a resort, and they're stuck there, and they have to couple up immediately. And there's always this moment that is sort of horrifying where, like, they have the women in bikinis and they have the men come in, and the men get to pick which one they want to go couple up with. And every year, the question is, will the dark-skinned girl get picked last?
Oh.
And across, I think there's 3 different franchises, major franchises, UK, Australia, and US. And only once in the US was a dark-skinned woman not picked last. And so sometimes I'm encouraged, I think, oh, do people actually need my book? There's Nicola Yoon, there's all these great stories that, like, you're seeing, Black women everywhere being chosen, and then I'll watch Love Island and be like, no. Still can use some reassurance.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm not much of a reality TV watcher except for Amazing Race. So,
oh, I love Amazing Race.
I do too. I love Amazing Race, and I think it's so much fun to watch, but that's about the only reality TV I watch. And maybe every once in a while, one of those cooking shows, but I'm not a big cook, so not even really those. But I was like, okay, I'll have to ask her what Love Island is. Well, how about the title for this one? Obviously, you're working with a modern retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but how did you end up calling it The Bennet Women?
Well, when I first envisioned this story, it was a lot more of an ensemble piece, and it was a lot more based in place. I really had an idea about sort of Bennet House as this oasis on a college campus, where these particular kinds of sort of slightly nerdier women got to fully be themselves, and then sort of form a sisterhood out of that. So knowing that I was doing this retelling and not actually using a blood family for my sisterhood, I really wanted to create that unity from the house and from the culture of the house and the friendships that form within it, and had that lead the story. And there was one version where the house had its own sort of prologue. I gave this history of the house and Dorothea Bennet, and going back to a Jewish Armenian person who was the first owner of the house. And I was like, okay, this is too much. This is like, I was told this is too much prologue. But I think I like grounding my stories in a sense of place. And so that's the Bennet of it all, is the house that brought them all together. My Charlotte Lucas character, who is Tessa, is also an RA in the house. And I just wanted them to be this sort of like unit of sort of sisterly friendship, even though she's not technically a Bennet, but she is a Bennet woman.
Well, I liked that. And obviously, then it gives you a clue that it's going to have some reference to a Jane Austen story,
Exactly.
which is fun because I mean, I'm always amazed at what a huge, I guess you call it subgenre. It is a retelling of Jane Austen stories.
I was very lucky to be on, I think it's a Publisher's Weekly list of upcoming retellings, and I saw right below mine, there's another Pride and Prejudice retelling that's set in the world of burlesque, which sounds really interesting. I was like, you can do this so many ways.
You really can. So, was the list that you were on retelling of Jane Austen or retelling of Pride and Prejudice?
It was retellings coming in 2021.
Oh, so any retelling.
Right. There were 3 Austens and then others, and then 2 of the Austens were Pride and Prejudice.
Got it. Yes, I do think it is the most common of the retellings. I agree with that completely. And they're so fun to read. And I think that the In Sense and Sensibility, I think her last one was a retelling of Persuasion. And I'm trying to think of the name of it. It was really fun too, because again, I love that.
Recipe for Persuasion.
Yes, that one exactly. And I really loved that book. I don't like Sense and Sensibility at all. So I tend to not then read the retellings of it since I don't even like the original. So you said Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion are your favorites too?
Yes.
Are there any of her others that you really like or don't like?
I enjoy Northanger Abbey. I think it's really funny. I think if you read it as a straight comedy more than a romance, it's really great. I like Lady Susan too. I like Jane Austen when she's catty and funny. It's funny. The one that I like least is the one that next one I'm trying to retell, which is Emma. And I also struggle with Sense and Sensibility just because the gap between the sisters is much wider than and like a feeling and sensibility, if you will, than the one in Pride and Prejudice. You know, it's easier. I think we can root for both sisters, and it's hard to root for both sisters at the same time in Sense and Sensibility.
Yes, I don't know why, but I have just never liked that story. I do love Emma, actually. And Emma is one of those stories. I just recently watched the movie with Gwyneth Paltrow with my daughter, who's 18. And, she was like, I don't think she loved Emma herself. And I said, I think Emma's one of those characters that as I've gotten older, I've liked better and understood better. That I think as you go through various parts of your life and you mature, you kind of understand maybe a little bit more where Emma might be the way she is when she was young. But so that's the one you're working on next. Is that what you said?
Yes. It's a much looser retelling than this one. It's actually, it's centering EJ's sister Maya. It's sort of from the Harriet character's perspective. And I know it's hard to think of how a 31-year-old Maya would be represent the Harriet character, but it's a hopefully post-pandemic novel. She's got sort of derailed, as many people did during the pandemic, and now is starting over, and she's going to be starting over in an industry that she does not understand that well. And my Emma character, or M as she's going to be called, is this venture capitalist wonder kid she says that she's trying to help other people who are not also born on third base, as she started with a lot of her father's money. And it's technically called a protege. And so I am learning a whole lot about drafting a second book, because this was several pivots from where I started. So it's interesting, but I'm really interested in the Harriet character as an idea, and what it'd be like to have someone just sort of pick you and decide that they're going to try and see to your success, and sort of questions about control and, basically, can you be friends with your boss?
So there's a lot going on in that one.
There's a lot going on.
Well, that's good though, just like there were in Jane Austen.
It's still going on.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, I'm working on it. Well, Knightley rivals Darcy for me in terms of my favorite of her heroes in the books. I just love him.
Yeah, I think I like Knightley better than Darcy, but I like Emma less than Lizzie.
Yeah, that's fair. Kind of balances out, right?
Right.
Well, what have you read recently that you really liked?
Gosh, so I have to start by saying that I'm drafting now, and so I've been taking in mostly audiobooks. And so I did not realize that Howl's Moving Castle was a book, and I immediately got the audiobook from my library, and it's so captivating. I just adored it as a fantasy story that sort of sweeps you off your feet. It's sort of middle grade YA, but gives you that like campfire story feeling. I have also been reading the Heartstopper graphic novels, the graphic novel series about 2 teenage boys in the UK slowly falling in love. And finally, something a little bit more grown up, but again, in my same fairy tale vein, I listened to the short story collection, Was Not Yours, It's Not Yours by Helen and Oyeyemi. And it's wonderful. It's wonderful to listen to as an audiobook. And just, she has a fascinating way of bending myth, but with beautiful prose.
I have never read her, but I've heard wonderful things.
I think that's a good place to start. I think that her novels are very twisty and require a lot of attention. I started one that's like, I cannot finish and write at the same time. So I have to choose putting that one away. But her short stories are delectable, fascinating bonbons.
Okay, good. I'll add that to my list. Well, Eden, thank you so much for joining me in the Thoughts from a Page podcast today. I really enjoyed talking about the Bennet women.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. If you like this episode, and I hope you did, please consider joining my Patreon as a page turner. Follow me on Instagram at Thoughts from a Page. Tell all of your friends about the podcast and rate it or subscribe to it wherever you listen to your podcasts. I would really appreciate it. The book discussed today can be purchased at the Conversations from a Page bookshop storefront, and the link is in the show notes. Thanks to Maggie Garza for sponsoring this episode, and I hope you'll tune in next time.
Are you tired of seeing your teen or young adult struggle on a path that clearly isn't the right fit? Is your teenager confused about which direction to take after high school? The future of work is changing rapidly, and our kids need to know all of the options available after high school so they're empowered to make the choice that is best for them. In each episode, we explore the latest trends that are shaping the opportunities of today and tomorrow. I'm your host, Betsy Jewell, and this is the High School Hamster Wheel Podcast.